In 2020, Gen Y and Gen Z will make up about half of the workforce. Let that sink in. Next year, us, the avocado toast eating Instagram generation, will be largely responsible for our economic growth, innovation, and productivity. In the job market, us millennials have garnered a bit of a bad reputation. We're known as notorious job hoppers who value work-life balance above anything else. We only want to do meaningful work with a purpose. We're environmentally conscious. We want to reduce the human impact on our planet. And we value experiences above collecting physical possessions. And yet, companies depend on us for their future competitiveness, right? But they struggle to attract us, and they struggle even more to retain us. We're the most mobile generation yet. We study abroad. We relocate easily for a new job. But some say, maybe it's just time for us to grow up, maybe to face reality. For them, that means to take that stable job, to save for the house, and to settle down. But is that really the solution? Job satisfaction is actually at an all-time low. Gen Y and Gen Z spent much shorter time at a company than previous generation. In fact, 43% of Gen Y and 61% of Gen Z say that they're planning to leave their current employer within the next 2 years. So could it be that companies are missing something? In 2018, a study found out that 75% of millennials consider a working from home or work remotely policy as important. And yet, companies still heavily rely on co-located work environments. Co-located is essentially just a fancy term for offices. We all know them. Our parents probably spend more time in offices than they have sleeping in their own bed. To me, that's a terrifying thought. In a lot of ways, I am a stereotypical millennial. I have lived, studied, and worked in 6 countries on 4 continents in the past 10 years. And I'm not even 30 yet. The longest I've lived in one place is 1.5 years. I'm really far away from owning my own apartment. I don't even own most of the furniture in the place I currently live in. I spend most of my income on experiences like traveling. In my last job, I led the international expansion of a German tech startup in New York City. It sounds amazing, right? And not to discredit this experience, it was a great learning experience. But every day, I commuted 1.5 hours to and from an office in which I initially had no coworkers. And when I had coworkers later on, I still felt isolated. I was in touch with clients all over the United States. I was in touch with the company back in Germany. I spent my entire workday with my laptop and phone. With those 2 devices, I could literally work from anywhere. I started doing that as much as I could. So for a few hours every week, I went to the surrounding cafes and parks and worked a little bit. One time, I went to Chinatown to get a foot massage. I called the spa, so I called ahead and I asked, do you have fast Wi-Fi? And they said yes. So I took my laptop, I went to the spa, and I worked while someone massaged my feet. It's pretty ridiculous, right? Sort of all to say that I was bored out of my mind with repetition and routine. And as much as I love New York, I didn't want to stay there long term. On top of all of this, to confirm the millennial stereotype, I didn't see a purpose in what I was doing. So I quit later that year, and I started to look into flexible work arrangements at distributed companies, so-called FROGs, fully remote organizations. I wanted to work what I liked. I wanted to structure my own days, and I wanted to be productive on my own terms. In the past decade or so, companies held the firm belief that office perks were one of the keys to keep millennials happy and engaged at work. Think about it. Open plan office layouts, ping pong tables, free beer, Startups and tech companies, they took that blueprint and they modeled every office from San Francisco to London and New York after it. But have you ever wondered that office perks are just one thing to keep you at work longer? And at the same time, they're so distracting from actually getting work done. So studies have actually confirmed that they've completely failed to keep millennials happy and engaged at work. And instead, the demand for remote work has been steadily increasing, especially in the last 2 years. And I realized when I was looking for a remote job, so did thousands of others. Why is it that offices are failing millennials? To me, the largest part was repetition, right? Going into work every day felt like Groundhog Day. But the problem is more complex than that. Millennials have redefined success. And the bad reputation that I mentioned earlier is simply an outcome of that. Our values and priorities have shifted. We now value freedom and flexibility. We're highly entrepreneurial and self-driven. We're the first generation that are digital natives who easily adopt new technology. And someone once said, millennials don't go to work, they just work. And still, we're often faced with the decision between a long commute on one side and insane real estate prices on the other. Are you okay with sacrificing a big part of your personal life? Or would you prefer to accept that you barely have any savings in the next couple of years? And all of that just to go to an office to do a job. We're the perfect generation to work remotely. Remote work requires specific skills that millennials actually excel at. At the same time, it matches our values and needs. Firstly, remote work inherently is more output than input focused. Simply said, it doesn't matter how much time you spend on something, what matters is the result. And whether you're at home or you're at a co-working space, just by being physically removed from your colleagues, you automatically have to have self-motivation and an independent work style. Probably the most well-known remote workers are the so-called digital nomads. They move around constantly, they're in different locations, they make sure to document it all on Instagram. It's nice to watch. Sometimes I wish I was one of them. I am not. In fact, most remote workers actually prefer to stay in one place. Most of them prefer to work from home. For me, I prefer to stay in one city. And even though I travel occasionally, at home I switch up my routine between my beautiful home office, co-working spaces, and cafes. Every day looks different. So no more repetition, right? That brings me to the work-life balance that we're accused of wanting more than anything else. I actually prefer to call it work-life integration. And yes, I do not want to work all the time. I'm an entrepreneur, I work a lot, but I don't work all the time. What I like to do is work on a Sunday morning. I have no problem with that. But then, for me, it's also fine to take a long lunch break during the week to do yoga and run a few errands. That is possible not just for entrepreneurs, but also for employees. And of course, not being physically tied to an office makes all of that really easy. And when you think about it, a lot of the work today already happens outside of offices. We're easily reachable by messengers, email, and we're often required to be super responsive during any hour. So even in remote work, we need to establish clear ground rules when you're working and when you are not. On a larger scale, remote work also has an economic and environmental impact. In Germany, 27% of the workforce has a commute of 2 hours or more. 2 hours in a car, a bus, a train, maybe even a plane. Aside from all the wasted time, we can also drastically reduce carbon emissions by letting people skip this commute and work from home or a co-working space that's close by to their house. We can also reduce the pressure on urban housing markets and revive rural areas. Currently, millennials only see career opportunities in large cities. But by allowing them to work remotely, we can still connect them to the best jobs. So all of this sounds great. To me it does, to a lot of people as well, but companies are still really quick at throwing objections. At this point, I've probably heard them all, and I want to share 3 of the most common ones with you. Number 1, how do I know that my employees are working when we're not in the same space? I usually answer with a question. I asked, how do you know they're working when you are in the same office? To me, physical presence doesn't mean productivity, but results do. Number 2, isn't remote work just an excuse for lazy people to hang out at the beach all day? And as you all know already, I've mentioned earlier, most remote workers actually prefer to stay in one place to work from home. Very few are digital nomads, and even fewer actually work from the beach. And the very few that do, they're making damn sure that their bosses see results. Number 3, how do you build a team and a company culture when everyone is separated? And to be fair, that one is a tougher nut to crack. And the frogs, remember the fully remote organizations? They're still perfecting that. The good news are that from personal meetups and company retreats to a large technology stack for communication and productivity, there are new tools popping up left and right at the moment that facilitate remote working. I want to leave you with these final words. I know that remote work is not for everyone. Some people just will prefer to go into an office every day, and that's fine. But by allowing millennials the opportunity to work completely location independent, companies actually cater to their needs. I couldn't find my perfect remote job, so I decided to help others find theirs. My current company matches talent with remote career opportunities, no matter where they're located. Companies can't get around millennials, but the current co-located office environment sets millennials up to fail. By allowing them to work flexibly, millennials will be more loyal, engaged, and productive.